Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we are jumping into another Tavour beer review, and we're jumping into one of my absolute favorite styles, as you know by now, stouts. Specifically, today we're doing flavored Imperial Stouts. So if you've seen a lot of my Tavour reviews and watched a lot of my Stout and Imperial Stout reviews, these names will be no stranger to you. Today we are going to be starting with Untitled Art, brewer based out of Wenatchee, Wisconsin. Everything I've had by them has been fantastic. Today we're going to be trying their Chocolate Macaroon Imperial Stout. This one clocks in at 12% ABV. And then number two is going to be from Omnipollo. This is their Aon Pecan Mud Cake, also an Imperial Stout. This one's a little lower ABV by 1%, so 11% on this one, and they are based out of Stockholm, Sweden. So two flavored, really big Imperial Stouts here by two brewers that I have had exceptional luck with everything I've tried that they've done. Everything I've had has been absolutely fantastic. Massive fan of both brewers. So we're going to jump right in, starting with the Untitled Art. This is the Chocolate Macaroon Imperial Stout at 12% ABV. Okay, so jumping into beer number one of today's Tavour Imperial Stout review. We have got Untitled Art's Chocolate Macaroon Imperial Stout out of Wenatchee, Wisconsin, clocking in at 12% ABV. As always, Untitled Art has really neat art on their labels, and it's from different artists every time. So I'll try to angle this, get it close to the camera and angle it down so the set lights aren't glaring it out. They always have kind of abstract art pieces on here, but it looks really neat. I like their cans. And this one specifically was done by Stephanie Hammond. Stephanie Hammond. She did the label art design there. So very cool. Nonetheless, let's go ahead and get this one cracked. I expect it's going to be big, probably a dessert stout with a little lactose for sweetness, with a chocolate macaroon as the flavor back. That'd probably be quite nice. It is brewed with coconut and other natural flavors, so obviously chocolate, maybe some other assorted, but let's get this poured. All right, actually seeing that come out of the can, that doesn't look as thick as I anticipated, but it's certainly not thin. It doesn't look like, say, a Hubbard's Cave thickness, but it looks nice. Very nice looking beer. All right. It formed a reasonable head. It's actually a bit more effervescent than I anticipated as well. Visually, that is textbook Imperial Stout. It is absolutely pitch black. You cannot see light through that. I've got really, really bright LEDs on my set, and I can't see anything through these at all. Looks great. Let's give it a sniff. Ho, 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 ho. That is getting massive aroma. Actually, yeah, I don't even have to get down in it. Just kind of in the vicinity, and you can smell it. It is pungent of coconut and chocolate and just decadence. There's a sweetness, there's a booziness. It actually smells like a macaroon in liquid form. If it tastes anything like its namesake, wow. Let's jump right in. Head's already kind of gotten out of the way a little bit here. I would have liked a little more retention, but let's jump in. Give this a whirl. Mmm. Mmm. Mm-hmm. Oh my word. Oh, it gets better the longer it goes. God, that is fantastic. Man, that is a fantastic beer. Golly, that is a fantastic beer. There's not much else I can add to that. That is fantastic. It tastes exactly as advertised. This tastes like a chocolate macaroon Imperial Stout, really. I mean, it is a chocolate macaroon in beer form. That is big. Pungent coconut, pungent chocolate, has this nice booziness to it. I mean, it's 12% ABV, so it's got that in there, but it's not overt. It's not oppressive, but it's enough to let you know, yeah, I'm drinking an Imperial Stout, and it's nice. Gives it this nice warming sensation too when it goes down. Big, big, big beer. It's got a very heavy body indeed. Mouthfeel, quite viscous. It does get quite creamy when you roll it around the palate. This is a big, big, big dessert beer, no question. It probably does have a little lactose. There's a sweetness to it, but it's not super, super sweet. It's not, it's not sweetened to the point that it feels to me like it's overdone. It's balanced. Everything about this is balanced. And honestly, coconut, for my money, is one of the harder ingredients to get right in a beer. If you don't have enough, if you use the wrong kind, if you don't do it for the right time, at the right stage, at the right step, it can really taste funky in a beer and not taste as people intended it to in a beer. It doesn't actually taste like coconut often. It starts to add these weird, funky off flavors. I've had many, in fact, I would say the majority of beers I've had that have had coconut, I haven't particularly cared for because the coconut has ruined the beer. And I love coconut. This is done well. Whatever their process is for getting their coconut in this beer, that's the process. I doubt that they would share their trade secrets with anybody, but they're doing it right. This is just absolutely delicious. I'm going to jump in. Obviously, I got a lot of information in that first sip. I'm going to jump in, none more, explore the Spanish and anything else I feel pertinent that you might want to know. Oh, it's a big beer. Such a nice body, such a nice mouthfeel. And it's just absolutely delicious. It just whacks you in the face with chocolate macaroon. I mean, it is just chocolate macaroon beer. It is absolutely fantastic. It's big, it's bold, it's decadent. This is a big beer. This is not one that you would chug or slam. This is one that's meant to be enjoyed sip by sip over a long period of time. It's 12% and it's big and bold. The way it comes on and all the flavors I described, really they just intensify over the course of probably 5 to 10 seconds after each sip. And then it's got a very slow, steady bell curve. It's got a long finish on each sip. The flavor really sticks around, particularly that coconut. And it's so nice. It is absolutely delicious. This is a fantastic beer. I absolutely love it. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, count my scores. When we come back, we will get to beer number 2 of today's Tavour Imperial Stout review. That is Omnipollo's Aon Pecan Mud Cake Imperial Stout, clocking in at 11% ABV. Okay, now we're jumping to beer number 2 of today's Tavour review, Imperial Stouts. So we're moving on to Omnipollo's Aon Pecan Mud Cake Imperial Stout. Sounds awesome. 11% ABV. They are based out of Stockholm, Sweden. Can art on this one, not much to talk about other than I like it. It's pretty neat. It's got a brown, black brown, kind of a chocolate brown with a smiley with its tongue sticking up out of its mouth, looking rather mischievous. So let's just get this cracked. Every beer I've had that's had Omnipollo attached in any way, shape, or form to date, and I've had 3 or 4 now, has been fantastic. So I have very, very high hopes for this beer. I'm not sure I've had an Imperial Stout of theirs yet, but let's get this poured. I've had a bunch of their different... Oh, that looks... Honestly, that reminds me of a Founder's beer or a Hubbard's Cave pouring out of the can. Man, that is as thick as motor oil or molasses. Yeah, it's so thick, I mean, I can't... It doesn't matter how much agitation I give. This one's not going to form much of a head. This is a properly big Imperial Stout. That is just thick. That is just thick. Ridiculously thick. Okay. Visually, as you might imagine, it is absolutely pitch black. There's not a hint of light making its way through this beer. It doesn't stand a chance. Let's give it a slight swirl, give it a sniff. Oh, this is another one. Very akin to the last one. You don't have to get right down in it to pick up the aroma. It's quite pronounced. But when you do, really get down right over it, God, it smells so good. Okay, so I smell chocolate. I smell coffee notes. It smells like a mix of a bunch of different types of chocolate. Bitter and bakers and semi-sweet and sweet and milk and white. It smells like an amalgam of chocolates. And a fair bit of coffee tones. Now, I'm sure that's coming from the roast malts. And I know, obviously, pecan mud cake, it's probably got some pecans in this brew. I'm not really detecting them, frankly. The malts are so thick and present that those chocolate and those coffee tones are really coming through as the dominant forces on the nose. Interestingly, even though this is only 1% ABV lower than the prior, I'm not getting any hint of a boozy aroma at all. It smells a little sweet, so I expect there's some lactose in here. Maybe it's a dessert Imperial Stout. I'll find out here in a minute. But I expected it to be big. I expected it to have a large, heavy body, a very viscous mouthfeel. You could see how thick, I mean, it literally looked like motor oil pouring out of the can. It looks as thick as motor oil or molasses. Let's jostle this one more time, one more sniff. God, it does smell properly amazing. Let's jump in, give it a sip. Oh, absolutely yes. Okay. Yeah. I'm getting the pecans in the flavor. Couldn't pick it up on the aroma. It definitely comes through in the flavor. They're not shy about that. I think this beer is aptly named. This is really, really good. And there is a hint of booziness that comes through in the flavor. Just a hint. It's more subtle than on the Untitled Art that we just reviewed, but it's there. So, very big presence in the mouth. It feels big, and it is big. It's a heavy beer. It is quite viscous. As you could see as I was pouring it, it looked quite thick. It is thick. There's a reason it looked that way. It's because it is. Now, agitating it around the palate does not make this beer particularly creamy, really at all. It's very, very thick. That's the story of this one. It's thick, it's heavy. There maybe is just the slightest hint of sweetness, but I don't think this was designed to be a dessert beer so much as just a big, flavorful beer. And they went with pecan mud cake, and honestly, I think they got it right. I can taste the pecans in full force. They're there. It's quite delicious. It works well in this beer. In fact, I haven't had that many beers that have had nuts or legumes in it. I say legumes because of peanut and peanut butter. Peanuts are not nuts. They are legumes in the same family as lentils. But nonetheless, this is a fantastic beer. There's a lot of pecan. There's a lot of different layers of chocolate. And that heavy coffee I could smell, it does come through a little bit in the back. I don't think they intend to add coffee with it. Maybe they did, but a bit of that comes through in the malt profile. So there's a little coffee undertone, but the dominant is chocolate and pecans. They really did nail it, at least in terms of naming convention. I'm assuming that's what they were going for, and it's right on the money. Big beer, very flavorful. I'm going to jump back in and explore the flavor development and how this finishes out in the balance. That is a fantastic beer. It's not sweet. It's not a dessert Imperial Stout. They didn't add lactose. If they did, it's trace amounts. Get it in your mouth. It's big. It's bold. It's roasty. Slight fruitiness from deep underlying tones of roasted malt, but you get tons of different layers of chocolate. You get baker's chocolate, you get bittersweet chocolate, you get semi-sweet chocolate, you definitely get white chocolate. There's layers of chocolate. That's mud in the mud cake and just a boatload of pecan. It comes through so strongly in this beer. And just a little undertone of the coffee, and that's coming straight through from the malts. I don't think they brewed this with coffee at all. I could be wrong, but I don't think that they did. I think it's from the malt selection that went in this beer, but it's exceptionally well balanced. This really does taste like a pecan mud cake beer. I mean, they absolutely nailed it. This is fantastic. This is another just great beer by Omnipollo and another great Imperial Stout. Honestly, I have really good luck with Imperial Stouts. It seems if companies are going to take the time to brew up an Imperial Stout, it's an expensive beer style to brew. There's a lot more fermentables that go into them. There's a lot more ingredients. It takes longer to do, higher ABVs. It costs more to produce. May as well not cut corners. Just go all in or go home. And that's what it seems that most brewers do. This is no exception. This is really, really nice. Gonna jump in one more time for flavor development because I keep getting sidetracked. It's so good. Slight malty sweetness, deep rich fruit up front. Immediately gets out of the way. Just punched with chocolate. Layers of the different chocolates I've described. Slight coffee undertone. and then the pecans come in. And all of that just intensifies, and it doesn't really get ridiculously intense. It just blooms, really, so that all the flavors become present to you, and then it kind of holds there. And it holds there, kind of at a plateau, and then it slowly starts this descent, and it's kind of a quick one. It doesn't have the longest finish in the world, but each sip is exceedingly enjoyable. It's exceedingly enjoyable. It's very interesting, and there's a lot of layers to it, and they kind of build up, peak, and they hold for a few seconds, and then they just slowly start a descent, and then they nosedive. And that's no knock on the beer at all. It's fantastic. Not every beer has to have a ridiculously long finish to be excellent, and this is excellent. I really enjoy this. I'm going to take my time sipping on this. I will come up with my scores, and when we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both of these beers, we're going to go through and get them ranked. Starting with the Untitled Art Chocolate Macaroon Imperial Stout. This one clocked in at 12% ABV. Untitled Art is based in Monaco, Wisconsin. The aroma on this, absolutely fantastic. It was very, very pronounced. You could smell just a boatload of chocolate and coconut. Indeed, it smelled like a chocolate macaroon in liquid form. It gets a 10 out of 10. Taste on this, amazing. I mean, it was amazing. It was exactly as described in the name of the beer. It was a chocolate macaroon imperial stout. They absolutely nailed what they were going for. Gets a 10 out of 10. Body on this was huge. At 12% for an imperial stout, I expected to be, and it certainly was. 10 out of 10. Mouthfeel on this one. The mouthfeel on this beer was very, very thick. Very, very viscous. I had a suspicion it would be when I saw it pouring out of the can, and indeed it was. It was absolutely huge. It gets a 10 out of 10. Finish on this, very, very long. Each sip was very long. This was an extremely pungent beer, and the flavors just absolutely dominated the palate. They just lingered and kept going and going and going with really quite a bit of intensity, even all the way to the very end. 10 out of 10. Head and retention. Head and retention on this one was okay. I saw how thick it was, and you know, I suspected it wouldn't get that great of a head. It formed one, and then it was gone. It was just so thick. It's hard on those thick ones. If you had it on a nitro tap at a bar, I'm sure it would be amazing. But poured at home, you know, it is what it is. It just did average, it gets a 5. Appearance-wise, this was textbook Imperial Stout, pitch black, no light at all through it, 10 out of 10. Balance, honestly, this was just perfectly balanced. For an Imperial Stout that is kind of a dessert style, had a little sweetness to it, really accentuated the flavors that they went for in the beer. It doesn't really get much better than that. You got full-on malt bill, you got tons of chocolate, you got tons of coconut. It tasted exactly as described and in just beautiful harmony. Even a little hint of booze, but not overbearing. I loved it. 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible, subjectively, I thought this beer was a home run. Honestly, I think that they nailed what they were going for in this beer. 10 out of 10 for me. Finally, as an example of the style, there are many, many Imperial Stouts out there, and certainly many dessert style, little sweetness, different flavors. This is one of the better ones I've had for sure. I think they absolutely have a winner on their hands with this beer. If you like beers like that, this is one I would seek. I gave them a perfect 10 out of 10. That brings the total score on Untitled Art's Chocolate Macaroon Imperial Stout to a 95 out of 100. So this is indeed a top tier Imperial Stout, well worth getting your hands on. Beer number 2. This is Omnipollo's Aon Pecan Mud Cake Imperial Stout. This one's slightly lower ABV at 11%, and Omnipollo is based out of Stockholm, Sweden. The aroma on this was very nice. It was slightly less intense in aroma than the Untitled Art, but not by much. It was still upper echelon. I only docked 1 point. I gave it a 9. The taste, absolutely fantastic. Now, completely different than the prior. This was not made like a dessert style. It didn't have sweetness. It was just flavored and big. And you got just a boatload of pecan, and you got a boatload of many different chocolate flavors. So it really, again, was another great example of they got what they were going for. It did remind me of a pecan mud cake. I loved it. 10 out of 10. Body on this one. Body on this was quite robust. It was very big indeed. An 11% Imperial Stout you would expect it to be. Though it wasn't quite as heavy as I anticipated. And sure, one ABV percentage point between the two difference, but that's not that great to make that big of a difference. I did expect it to be a bit more robust. Even though it was a heavier beer, it wasn't as heavy as I anticipated. I gave it a 9. Mouthfeel. I enjoyed the mouthfeel on this very, very much. Though, again, compared to the prior, it wasn't quite as thick and viscous as I did anticipate. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't thin, but an 11% Imperial Stout, I did expect more. I docked 1 point here as well. I gave it a 9. Finish. The finish on this beer was enjoyable. Each sip was absolutely enjoyable, and it was very, very tasty. And, you know, it had a reasonable length to it, just not as long as I expected, especially on the heels of the prior. The finish, you could say, was brief by comparison. It was high end of average on each sip. I gave it a 6. Head and retention. The head and retention on this one was almost non-existent. I mean, it was barely there and then it was gone. I can't rate it any higher than a 1. Appearance. Just as with the first, this is textbook Imperial Stout. Pitch black, can't see a hint of light through it. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Balance. I thought that this was a fantastically balanced beer. The balance of kind of the chocolate mud side of the beer to the pecans, I thought was expertly done. I legitimately didn't expect the pecan to come through really at all, and it came through beautifully and in perfect harmony with the base malt backbone and the chocolate edge. I give it a 10 out of 10. Feeling and intangible, I love this one as well. Completely different Imperial Stout drinking experiences. One sweet, one not. Completely different, though both flavored. I thought they nailed this one. I loved it. I gave it a 10 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, I did take some points off and some pretty big points in a few categories, but honestly, I thought the beer was still so well done that as an example, I only docked 1 point, and that's a testament to how good I thought this beer was. So it does get a 9 out of 10, which brings the total score on Omnipollo's Aon Pecan Mud Cake to an 83 out of 100. So we are looking at a 12-point spread here, 95 versus 83, and they're both a little bit different. Both big, intense, flavored Imperial Stouts, but one slightly sweetened to make a dessert style, and one just big, bold flavored. Completely different drinking experiences, and both fantastic in their own right. So it just kind of depends on your personal preference, but I do recommend both of these and do think they are both well worth staking. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to keep in the loop when our videos go live to YouTube, you can click the notification bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.